I have a story from BoundIntoComics.com. Marvel Comics Spider-Man line editor writes off fan who respectfully asked for retcon of one more day. Bold to claim that your view is one representing multiple millions of fans' viewpoint. What can only be described as a stunning display of anti-fan sentiment, Marvel Comics editor Nick Lowe recently responded to a Spider-Man fan who respectfully inquired about a possible retcon of the wall crawler's infamous One More Day storyline by telling them essentially, kick rocks. This here's a Peach Momoko, like a variant. I don't know what's going on with Spider-Man there. MJ looks kind of cute, but, in old Spider-Man there, I don't know about that. But anyway, if one were to ask almost any fan of Spider-Man's comic book adventures what single storyline they would retcon, and near unanimously the answer they'd give would be a resounding refrain of One More Day. Penned in 2008 by then Marvel Comics editor-in-chief Joe Quesada out of his belief that a married superhero would be seen as unrelatable by younger readers. The entire four-issue tale eventually concluded with Peter Parker trading his marriage with Mary Jane to Mephisto in exchange for the demons saving the life of a then critically wounded Aunt May. Of course, this decision to throw away one of the greatest romances in comic book history in order to presumably help ease Quesada's own midlife crisis went over like a brick. And in the years since, fans have continued to hold One More Day as ground zero for the absolutely abysmal state of the webslinger's recent 616-based outings. Sadly, while fans have spent the last decade and a half begging Marvel Comics to either retcon the story outright or at the very least find a way to reunite Peter and MJ, just search the story's name on any social media platform and you're guaranteed to unearth an absolute trove of disappointment and outrage. I can attest to that. I mean, it's people hate it, basically. The publisher has continually shut down any and all attempts at discussing the matter. And for an example of just how adverse the Spider editorial staff is to this idea, during his run on Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, writer Nick Spencer spent a good chunk of his creative energies rebuilding the pair's relationship and laying the groundwork for them to finally find themselves back in each other's arms. But as soon as he left the book, one of the first moves made by his successor, current series writer Zeb Wells, was to not only rip the two apart yet again, but also spit on the corpse of the relationship by immediately throwing MJ into a relationship with quite possibly the biggest waste of time and space in Marvel history, Paul. Could possibly be a self-insert, by the way. This is old goofball Paul. Anyway, that old classic look on Spider-Man's face. Of course, despite the best attempts by Low Wells and the rest of the mainline Spider-Man team, fans have not stopped voicing their discontent with One More Day's continued in-canon status. With the letters pages of nearly every issue of Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6 featuring at least one message from a fan asking for someone to end their favorite hero's continual editorial suffering. I should tell you something. It's 2008, 2024 now. I ain't a math genius, but 16 years. People are still wanting you to get rid of this shit. That tells you right there, get rid of it. Most of these sentiments are hand-waved away by Lowe, often by way of, well, it's not for everyone, but they're going to keep on keeping on. The most recent issue saw him respond to such a letter by outright insulting its author. Featured in the back of the series' 57th issue, a fan by the name of Nick from New Zealand took the time out of his day to voice his opinion to Lowe that with the release of episode 53, I feel that this arc is a perfect microcosm, a pure distillation of the problems with the creative direction and ideology behind Spider-Man ever since 2008. There was the cover with him in Tombstone, but anyway, regardless. Peter has just turned evil for the third time in less than a year, the second time in only 4 issues, and all I'm left wondering is, haven't I already seen this before? Recap the fan, this arc, hell, the whole run by Zeb. Feels like we're going round and round in circles, and that feeling extends to the nearly 500 issues prior to this moment as well. Nothing's really changed in Peter Parker's life in all that time. He's still just as much of a broke loser who keeps pushing away the people around him as he was immediately following One More Day. All the while, everyone else in Marvel gets to grow and change. Hell, even Venom is a responsible father now. Yes, that's not a joke. Why isn't Peter allowed to see any development of his own like he had done for decades between 1962 and 2007? I speak for many millions of Spider-Man or fans of Spider-Man. When I say I'm disappointed with the creative direction, it's why I'm so supremely happy with the new Ultimate Spider-Man book, because it feels like a true continuation of Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and John Romita Sr. Ideals for the character and his growth. I really hope things will change soon, and so do many, many others. Now, first off, I'm not the biggest fan of Ultimate Spider-Man because there's just not enough action in it. It's way too slow paced. It's like a damn TV show. That's one of my biggest problems with comics overall, especially more of the current ones, is that they pace them like it's a TV show. I don't want to see a bunch of people sitting around and talking. That's boring as hell. What you might as well just be writing a TV show at that point. Comic books are about action and fighting and stuff, at least in my opinion. But anyway, I've digressed enough. In response, rather than even trying to feign amicability or respect for his viewpoint, Lowe instead dismissed a New Zealand based reader as essentially an outlier fan who had no idea what they were talking about regarding audience sentiment towards One More Day. Hello, fellow Nick, and thanks for writing. Spider Editor began. Sorry, ASM hasn't been doing it for you. As for Peter turning evil as part of an ongoing story thread we were working on that only seemed to end in Amazing Spider Man 35. If it didn't work for you, that's a bummer. It worked for us and a lot of fans. Turning to the fans' bigger question, would Stan and Steve and John want Peter's life to develop? I'm not sure, and I can't speak for them. I certainly don't think they had a definite plan for such development, as they had no way of knowing this book would last decades past their time on the book. I've come to think that Spider-Man growing, aging, and developing his life along with a reader in Amazing Spider-Man isn't the way to go. I believe that Spider-Man belongs to all fans and all generations and should mostly be as universally relatable as possible. It's one of the many reasons why comic sales are in a toilet, especially for American comics. Why just mostly? Well, we should still do stories like Superior Spider-Man worldwide and beyond that drastically change Spider-Man, but then come home to the core of Spider-Man. That said, we at Marvel contain multitudes and have offered many stories of Spider-Man growing and aging beyond his archetypical core, if that's more your thing. And it was here that Lowe would fully hand control over of his driver's seat to his ego. Turning to the fans' claim that millions wanted the story retconned, the other dismissed. I do think it's bold to claim that your view is one representing multiple millions of fans' viewpoint on how Amazing Spider-Man should work as a comic with no way to prove it. But you do you. From there, drawing his response to a close, Lowe ultimately declared, regardless, I'm glad you're enjoying Ultimate Spider-Man. I love that book too. Jonathan and Marco and company are so good. It's just the kind of thing where it's like, dude, the sales are in the toilet. They've gone down. They had, comics had a little bit of a resurgence during the pandemic and stuff because people were in, or I should say after the pandemic and stuff, or depend on your viewpoint on how you want to look at it. How long, some people say we're still in the middle of the pandemic, to be honest. But anyway, it's all a little bit of a resurgence, not as big as like say video games or whatever, for example, but it's all a little bit of a resurgence. Well, that's all gone now, and it's going down. It keeps going down and down and down. They don't release sales numbers, so we have to go by estimates. But you talk to comic book retailers, and they say everything's down. No one gives a shit. They don't care. Marvel Comics. I mean, you're lucky to sell X amount of copies. It depends on the book, because some books. But I mean, they got retailers saying stuff like, if this comic come out 20 years ago, it would have been canceled basically because of low sales. But now it's one of the higher selling books, that kind of stuff. And they don't really get into too many specifics because they can talk specifically about their store. And then you kind of, they use a survey to compare it with a whole bunch of other stores and so on and such forth and stuff. I've seen stories about possibly 70% decline in the last 10 years and things of that nature and stuff. But horrible, and plus also just in the cultural zeitgeist, as they would say. You're talking that comic books just don't really matter all that much. It wasn't that long ago. It was like, a decade ago, basically, they sold 1 million copies of Star Wars. Right around the time The Force Awakens come out, Episode 7 and everything. And now they would be lucky they're lucky to sniff probably a tenth of that. It's ridiculous, especially with most of their books, if not all of them. It's just absurd. And One More Day is like that would be a fine story if you wanted to go that way, but then eventually have Peter and MJ get back together. But to claim that, oh well, everything's doing fine, it's ridiculous for you to say that millions of people complain. They're still complaining about it 16 years later, dude. What are you talking about? Like, you sound like the biggest moron in the world when you say that kind of stuff. If it's 16 years after a story and people are still talking about it, that means that there are a lot of people who read the story, and if they're complaining about it, that means that they didn't like it. They weren't interested in it. It's just stupidity. It's just absolute stupidity for him and guys like him. And I understand they're trying to toe the company line and everything, but it's like, man, just piss off with that stuff, dude. It's stupid. The other story I've got real quick, I didn't want to make an entire video about it, but this is from the Ubisoft website. It's about developing at Ubisoft. And here's their mentorship program. As it says right here, with this mentorship, we have an exciting opportunity to support talents from different backgrounds, bringing fresh perspectives and new ideas. I guess I should point out, it's important for us to help build an inclusive entertainment industry that reflects the diversity of our players. selected candidates, yada yada. Here's the eligibility criteria. To be eligible, you must identify as a woman or a non-binary individual. So in other words, hey men, you don't even bother. Don't even bother. You're not eligible. It's like we're going to be inclusive, but we're going to exclude men. Like, so you're supposed to sit there and basically, as a man, just say, "Well, I identify as a woman." There you go. I'm past it. Or if you don't want to go that far, oh, I identify as non-binary. My pronouns were they them, like some idiot. It's ridiculous. It's like, plus also they're saying must reside in Ontario because this is in Canada, where it's basically legal to do that. If this is here in America, where I live, you know, you could probably, you not probably, you could bring a lawsuit. Whether you would or not, I'm not really sure. But anyway, it's just ridiculous. Just absolutely ridiculous that yet again, help us build an inclusive industry, but you have to identify as a woman or a non-binary individual. Men are not allowed. I'm surprised it doesn't say anything about essentially no white people. Now I'm really surprised that that's not in there. I mean, it does mention stuff. It's non internship or employment opportunity, blah blah blah. It's more about mentor, but it's like, so. I mean, I understand that it's not maybe quite as bad as basically saying, hey, well, we're hiring for a bunch of jobs, but no white people or no men or whatever. I get that. But it's ridiculous that this kind of stuff is even allowed, let alone, or I should say, it's ridiculous that this stuff is encouraged, let alone allowed. It's absurd. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble a little bit here. I just wanted to point that out because I thought that was fucking stupid. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. I'll link both this stuff in the description box if you have to read it for yourself. Don't really know why you'd want to read the Ubisoft shit because, whatever. But I'll include it anyway. But anyway, thank you very much for watching and have a good one.